You're listening to the Staffroom Podcast with Chey and Pav. We talk casually yet poignantly about the most relevant topics in teaching today.
So come on and chat with us because we love to engage in great conversation.
Welcome to episode 64 of the Staffroom Podcast. Today, we are talking about getting creative with our learning spaces. We've had lots of changes happen in our classrooms, especially the spaces and the way that our spaces are designed this year. So we want to dive into a little bit more of a conversation of what we're doing with those spaces today. But before we can get into that conversation, I should probably introduce myself. My name is Pav Wander, and I have a co-host. He sits next to me, and he usually introduces himself.
My old man used to tell me before he left this crummy world, never chase buses on the Staffroom Podcast. Because you always get left behind.
You're getting good with those sound effects.
And my name's Chey. Hurricane Cheney. And yes, I am getting a little bit more masterful with the Roadcaster, the computer, the audio jack, the iTunes.
You're getting comfortable. You're getting very comfortable. We need to throw more challenges your way, I think.
I do not need to be challenged.
You're doing
Put
quite
down
well.
that white glove. It is not needed. Oh, not a duel. Just a challenge.
Not
oh,
a
sorry.
duel.
Pav, how are you?
I'm doing great, Chey. How are you?
I'm great. Ready for this episode.
Very ready.
I'm very relaxed because last week's episode was...
It was a little intense. It was, that high in anxiety. No, not really high anxiety, but it was up there in terms of just making sure that we covered what we wanted to say.
We wanted to make sure we hit our marks.
Yeah.
We're open for further discussion.
Yes.
And didn't sound like two gym guys.
Yeah.
And the reviews, not that they're movie reviews, it's not like it's Siskel and Ebert telling us about Staffroom Podcast.
I remember those two.
But the feedback on that episode did exactly what we really wanted it to do. We wanted to create a space of dialogue and conversation and rich back and forth, and a place where people didn't feel that we were telling them what everything was. Merely our experiences, our reflections, the things we looked up, and our own personal extensions. And we worked our definition a little differently, and we came with our extensions of what everything meant. And it has funneled such rich conversation. I don't necessarily say it's our best episode, but in terms of online reaction and comment and feedback and side chats and side messages and WhatsApps and Voxer shots and
Boxer shots, I like that.
well, it's Friday night.
That's a game. That's a game we should play.
I'm having a Voxer shot. Pardon me. You heard me. Voxer shot. Just rich dialogue and conversation. And as a podcaster and sort of telling a story and hitting a spot, it hit the mark. It did what we wanted it to do. We wanted to have rich conversation, and we got it.
Now, I know that most of you who are listening right now, if you haven't actually listened to the previous episode, episode 63, you've probably already gone back to your episode list to see what it was. But we will also let you know it was about toxic positivity, and it can be a little bit of a sensitive topic for a lot of people, especially those that might have been accused of it. You know, I don't know.
Or have felt victim to it.
Or have fell victim to it. Yes, exactly. And so it's one of those situations. Like Chey and I have been on both sides of that, you know, and so rather than becoming, supremely defensive about, being accused of it or have fallen victim to it, we have done a lot of reflection, and that episode took us months to actually get out, and which is very rare for us because we've been known to pump out a few episodes just in an hour, so from start to finish. And so this episode was a little bit different for us. So it required a lot of thinking. It did require a lot of research. It required us to really formulate a working definition of what we thought it meant, and we extended it to our lives as educators and what it looks like in our buildings, what it could look like in our buildings, and how it affects us on more of a personal level. So it was increasingly very impactful for us.
So episode 64.
Let's get into it.
We're talking about creative spaces and sort of not necessarily how to create creative spaces, but how to be creative to get beyond a space where we maybe were feeling bottled in, or we didn't know how to expand and think differently in the spaces we've had. And one of the reasons I sort of brought this episode up was I've got very casual in my new space, which has come to expand into the hallway. And so the other morning, our custodian came up to me and go, "Chey, yeah, like, are you going to move that stuff that's been laying in the hallway for a couple of days? I want to mop the floor." I said, "Oh," I said, "Sorry, John, I got a little casual. I stopped picking things up off the hallway floor now. I just consider it my whole space." And then we had this conversation because I know the things you've done and your wild rides of where you've ended up in a space where we've taken non-traditional spaces and made them our learning spaces. And so that conversation with my custodian said, "Oh, Pav, this is what we could talk about this week, and we won't get in any trouble."
No trouble this week. No. Yes, you're absolutely right. That idea of getting very casual with our spaces, or cavalier with the space that we have, we've almost been a little bit spoiled because, as we entered this school year, it was very much, how am I going to function in a non-traditional classroom setting? For those of you who know, and those of you who don't know, I am in the gymnasium. That is my classroom to accommodate for the number of students that I have. That was the only space in the school where I could put my class of 26 students safely distanced from one another and be able to learn in that space. So it was very challenging in the beginning, thinking to myself, how am I going to do this? This is an impossible space to work in. And now, 2.5 months into the school year, 3 months into the school year, I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to move back into a classroom.
You did. You texted me the other day and you were like, I don't ever want to go back into a room.
No, because the challenges are still there. There are plenty of challenges, but what I've gained from having all of this extra space is just incredible. And what I could do with a space of this size, of this caliber, without the limitations of social distancing and physical distancing would be mind-blowing. And I know I'll never have that chance again. So I really want to make the most of it this year.
I've had... You have had multiple changes, and you've also had a career of multiple changes. Me, change is totally new. So I've taught grade 8 almost my entire life. I've taught in the same classroom, which had been 17 years. And I moved from a very big space, a very robust space, and a space in which I took a lot of pride and ownership in. And I can tell you now that I've left the space, I had created a gaming station with an old TV and an old Sega Genesis, and I had these nice little chairs, and it was just a great chill area. And I had a chill area where I had a sofa and a lovely chair and coffee tables, and students could relax there. And I had a working bench and stools, and kids could have maker spaces there. And I had a maker space, and I had an art station where kids could just dive into resources. I had a little mini stage at the front of the room. I had so many great spaces in my room that were so conducive for teaching and learning. And I always took pride in students not necessarily, and maybe I grew into this, to not necessarily look forward to coming to school because I was there, but because they wanted to be in the space. That the space was just as valuable as the teacher. And we've talked about the room being the third teacher. And I've always articulated when you when you maximize your space, you're almost co-teaching with your space, with your room. And I got very comfortable in those things. And then I moved this year. And then with COVID, a lot of those things, I moved to a smaller space. So most of that stuff is gone. COVID made a lot of those things not feasible. And so I reinvented myself in a tiny little room with desks separated. And as the year got on, and I know we're only 4 months in, but built a little bit of confidence, similar to you. I was a little apprehensive about the space and thinking, I was in such a great situation. How am I going to do this now? And then I just started to take little things and modify them a little bit and took some ideas and became very creative in trying to create a room that I didn't think was feasible, to create all those luxuries I had downstairs in that big, huge space and all those things. And I tried to duplicate them, but evolve them. And I started to think beyond just my walls because, Pav, in our areas, there's a big decline in physical enrollment. And so upstairs in my hallway, it's me and my classroom and 13 kids this year. In a hallway that would have been 4 classrooms and 140 kids. And so we have no access to the lockers. So that just means this is wall space for me now.
Right.
Because I never need to worry about kids getting in and out of those lockers. I never need to worry about disrupting another class because there's no one else up there.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden I have this huge horseshoe of space, and I don't need to worry about infringing on, well, would another teacher want this? Like, can I block these windows off to do this craft? Because what would another teacher say? I don't even need to worry about this. And so I've just taken the room to be, my room is now the room and this huge hallway, which I'm mindful enough to go down and close the doors. But it's really not to block out the sound. It's really a way of telling everyone else, don't come up here.
This is my zone. This is the Cheney hallway. The Cheney wing. I like that.
Oh.
The Cheney wing.
Signs are being printed and laminated on Monday morning. But Pav, why don't we get back to you?
Yeah.
And maybe talk a little bit about some of the things, the great spaces you've created in your space. And I'll come back and maybe share a couple of mine and then maybe get to a 3 Enlightened Minutes guest if we have one.
Maybe.
Or we might need another wee trip from a pirate.
Yes, that could work out really well. So I've kind of gone in the opposite direction. So I've gone into a very traditional classroom to a very vast space. And as you were speaking, you've made use of your hallway space, which has been really great for you. I'm finding a very similar situation now where I used to have a very small and confined classroom traditionally, and wall space was always limited. So, it was always, if I needed to display work or put up some anchor charts that we developed, during a lesson or whatever, I'd have to take something down in order to put something up. And that became work. And so we often got very lazy and just didn't do it. And so a lot of the time, the stuff that I meant and I wanted to put up in the classroom space as part of the third teacher, that is a very important concept. And I've always tried to live up to that. Became very difficult. But that I don't find I have this year because I've got a giant gymnasium. So I can put things up and not ever worry about having to take them down. So since the beginning of the school year, we've been putting up our work and displaying the things that we've done in the class, even if it's just discussions and there's Post-it notes sticking up on chart paper. We put those things up so that we can always look at them, refer back to them, and it's always a display of some of the really rich thinking that we've done in our classroom space. So it's not really always necessarily there for us to look at to say, oh, what was that reference point? Let me go check on that. It's more of a way to remind ourselves that we've done lots of really great things in this room. And I feel like we can leave it up and not have that pressure to take it down and put up something new because there's lots of wall space.
I've got to cut you off because we've never talked about this.
Yeah.
But I've got it written down here that my room and the space is now, it's a timeline for the entire year.
Right.
Because nothing is ever coming down. So when you said that, my first thought was, that's the last time I leave my notes out on the coffee table.
That thought just popped into my head as you were speaking.
And then I had to cut you off as you said that because we've never referenced that. But I was thinking the same thing. Nothing is coming down this year.
No, it doesn't need to.
sticky notes that are on the board from September are still there because I've got them going everywhere.
That's right.
That was such a great point. Sorry for cutting you off because I know I throw you off, but...
Oh, when do you ever cut me off? That's a new one.
I don't have a history of cutting you off. I want to hear some data that indicates that I've been known to cut you off.
You know, everything that we've ever said to each other has been archived on some sort of recording. So I'm sure somebody out there could go and do some tally marks.
Alex is already on it.
I know, that's exactly who I was thinking.
All right, sorry to interrupt, Pav.
That's all right.
Back to you. Just such a valuable point and such a great takeaway. How often do you as teachers get to just build everything up? It's almost like the digital world in the physical world.
That's right. And so that's why, you know, that's one of those reasons why I feel so spoiled with this space, because how can I ever go back to a classroom where my wall space is limited? I love having all of this space to continue to put things up. And speaking of putting things up, and I know you're going to talk about this in a little bit, we've put up spots in our gym to use for specific areas. And even though the gym is one big rectangular space, we've developed these quote unquote rooms throughout the gym. So we have our photo studio. We call it the photo studio. All it is just some white paper up on the wall that we use to take pictures against. But we call that the photo studio. So when I say, okay, guys, so we're going to take turns going into the photo studio today to take some pictures, all the kids know what I'm talking about, and they know that it's a room in our house. And so we love that feeling of the community of the home, right? This is our space. We just today, actually, because we have a couple of green screen activities that we hope to be able to put together in the next couple of weeks, we just put up our green room. So we put up the green chart paper up on the wall, and we set up our green room, and the kids are very excited about the green room. They even selected, you know, which wall do you think works best for our green room? Well, we got to go with this wall. It's kind of away from the door, so there's not going to be a lot of noise. So they're thinking about this. They're starting to make this space their own. And, you know, the last point that I wanted to make before I throw it back to you, Chey, is this idea of flexible seating. This has been a huge challenge for us because we have to maintain distance in the classroom. But I'm in a gym that is usually sectioned off half and half for, you know, if you wanted to throw up your divider wall in the middle. But I use the entire space. So I have all my desks that are set up in one half of the gym, and the back half of the gym is actually empty. And so a lot of students, you know, when it comes to working on tasks, whether they are independent tasks or I have them working in a group task, will ask, you know, can I go sit in the back, or can I go sit in the open space at the back? And it's sort of away from everybody else. And so I have a couple of people working in one corner, and they're, even if they're sitting, you know, physically distanced from one another, they have enough space to work together, but secluded from everybody else in the classroom. So that is really nice. So it's almost like having flexible seating in the space. We've got benches in the back, and so they make use of the benches. They put their Chromebooks on top of the bench. They sit on the floor, and they're kind of away from everybody else. And it's a different way of sitting rather than being at a desk all day long. So they really enjoy having that option. And also, because our stage is in the gymnasium, and it has a wall that sections off from the rest of the space, as well as a curtain, you can actually go up on the stage, and it's a quiet working area. And I am so lucky to have 3 adults in the room with me in the morning and 2 in the afternoon. So it's 3 of us in the morning, 2 in the afternoon. So if I needed to send a group onto the stage, I could send one of the other adults in the space, or I could be that person, and go up and just take a small group to go work on something, you know, with a little bit of quiet and a little bit, you know, away from everybody else if they need that quiet working space. And so, you know, I feel so blessed after 2 months of trying to adjust to this new space, to have this opportunity to really use the space to my full advantage. And for something that made me so anxious and so apprehensive at the beginning, I don't know how I'm ever going to go back to a traditional classroom after this.
You just became gym girl.
Gym girl. I was always gym girl, by the way.
This is true.
Mm-hmm.
couple great nuggets from what you were saying, and it reminded me. Oh,
Sorry.
Careful now. This I should have control of everything.
You already do.
Complete control. The Ontario government had a great document on your space and creating a space. And when you were talking, it reminded me of this one quote that we had talked about before as we were getting ready. Is this quote? Quote, "A classroom that is functioning successful as a third teacher will be responsive to the children's interests, provide opportunities for children to make their thinking visible, and then foster further learning and engagement." End quote. And that's in that Ontario document for learning spaces. And it reminded me of the things you're talking about. And I love that visible component because we just talked about that. All the learning is going to be visible. And visible, I call it honoring it. You're honoring that student work where it's not just something that ends up, in a do-a-tang. And not that there's anything wrong with it in a do-a-tang, but there's power in seeing your work up. My students know when they go off for lunch that the hot glue gun is coming out and Mr. Chey is going to start putting stuff everywhere. And on a little side tip, teachers, do not waste your time with tape or sticky tack or glue sticks. Hot glue gun everything. It works magnificently. And so, but there's even at the age of 13 or 14, they don't want to talk about it, but they know when they go out for lunch that Mr. Cheney's going to put something somewhere. Everything's going to go on display. That work is going to be honored, and it's going to be flying down the hallway. And now the entire hallway, in my particular case, has such value. There's such vibrancy. And you talked about that flexible seating. I had a similar incident where I asked my custodian if I could take out a few chairs and benches randomly from rooms that are locked and closed and put them scattered throughout the hallway. So kids now ask almost instantaneously, "Oh, can I go work on the hallway?" To the point that there's almost never anyone in the room.
That's always nice.
And similar to you, we've defined some spaces. So we are running a virtual or morning time announcement using the Google Classroom.
I love that.
And so to start, we did it in the back of the room, and then we ventured in the hallway. And then we made ourselves a little studio out there in the hallway. And I got some chart paper and I got some background for it. And so we designed a little studio, and it didn't have to be expensive or have all the right tools. I use an old beaten up school desk, probably from 1954. There's a milk crate on top of that, which I hot glued some cardboard on top of that puts the Chromebook that lines up perfectly straight. I've then flipped over chart paper. It's taped all over the wall, but it's not taped hot glue gun, but it's going to be there permanently. And then the students just roll through. And so we never need to move anything. The studio is ready for morning announcements all the time. It's been fantastic. You go 10 feet down and there's this huge green screen panel, top to bottom, and all the lockers, taking up about 20 of them. Never would have had that space.
No.
Continue walking down. I now have an entire panel of lockers that would have been for 2 classes. Now is my math wall. And it's my math problem solving wall, where it's just in the middle. It says math, obviously a little title page. And then students have all these quotes around it about what math problem solving is. And then we've posted our work in process math problem solving spaced out along this wall so kids can explore and work on it. And you talk about flexible seating while they're standing up, they're rotating around the space, they're not crammed on top of each other. Then at the end of the hallway with these beautiful windows, this is reserved. This is TikTok space.
Oh, TikTok space.
This is TikTok space.
I remember those windows right outside of my classroom.
Bright in the morning.
Beautiful.
They love them. It's like this, hey, Mr. Chang, we're going down the end of the hallway. It's we know what this means.
It's prime lighting.
TikTok.
Yeah.
We're making some TikToks. And so, and when you were talking about Europe things, we talked about space. Also, we wanted to reference is that the simplicity of it all and the luxury of the environment in which we're in. We're sort of taking things that weren't available before and just turning them into different things. We're using our chart paper to make green screens, to make backdrops for, I have my photo studio in the back corner of my room where it's the chart paper flipped over, so it's white, set up with a little tripod. And all of a sudden, it's when you designate a space and you don't need to alter it, it becomes cemented in the class culture, that third teacher. I have a photography studio.
Yeah.
And so when we do photography as a particular art class, yes. But because we never take it down, students in other activities when we were getting ready for our empathy assembly, oh, Mr. Chen, can I do a double exposure? There's no setup to get the double exposure ready. We already have the space.
Yeah.
And so once when I was in this small little room at the beginning of the year and trying to manufacture, because I do have a small little green screen corner in my room, but it's like one sheet of paper. Like it's one student can sit on one bench and we can capture it. But once I got comfortable to just say, let's take ownership of this hallway. Let's have stools and benches and chairs and designate areas. All of a sudden, none of your spaces, the work doesn't need to come down, but your workspaces don't need to come down either. And it's just been fantastic for student growth, student excitement. And so you eliminate a barrier to creation with our students. We think about when you're in the online world, if I think about my podcast, our podcast, sorry, slip of the tongue.
Podcast.
And if you think that comment won't be forgotten, ladies and gentlemen,
never.
Please check on Twitter tomorrow morning how this post-episode conversation went. If you go online, for every click to find a podcast, it's a click that you lose a vast percentage of people. I'm not going to click on a web page, scroll 7 clicks down, go over to another tab, ask a friend Charlie who might have the code to get to the podcast. No, you're not listening. And the same is, I feel, true in our classrooms. The more barriers we can take away, the more obstacles we can take away to shooting a green screen video or taking a photography or having an announcement space or having a TikTok space or having a already made available space for math problem solving is an obstacle that because it's not there, students just quickly step in. They're never going to be limited to shoot a video, like to make a math talk with a green screen, because it's already there. They don't even really need to ask me for anything. That everything is available. So we've made great creative enhancements of our spaces and really taken advantage of this year, of this blank canvas, to sort of just think differently with our surroundings. And the hallway's no longer just a hallway. The gym's no longer just a big awkward space where I have to scream to teach.
Well, I still have to scream to teach. Yeah.
I know.
but I am very pleased that I have a voice that projects. So it's not really a problem for me. It's a problem for my students. So I spend a lot of time zigzagging, playing Frogger through all of the desks in the classroom to get to each student so that I can hear what they're saying, because they just don't want to project their voice. It's so funny when they're outside, you can hear them from a mile away, but as soon as they're inside the classroom, what? Can you repeat that? Sorry, one more time? So that's what I have to deal with. Kids are getting really, really, really good at repeating themselves thoroughly throughout the day. So that's still a challenge for me. But yeah, you're absolutely right. There are so many different ways that we are being super creative with our space. And I don't know.
Say that again.
There's so
No,
many.
no, not that part. The I don't know part.
I don't know.
Oh, that sounded great. I'd never hear that from you.
Me? I say I don't know all the time. I don't know.
I don't know. This is a perfect segment. Perfect time for our 3 enlightened minutes break.
Oh, okay. So, do we want to have Pirate Teacher come back, or
I don't know if we need to have Pirate Teacher come back, but this is typically the point where we go into our 3 enlightened minutes and we're going to come back with a little wrap up and a swag bag.
So we can do a 3 enlightened minutes.
There be time, eh? I've been working on my literacy, and I feel a lot better with my writing and reading.
Oh boy!
So I can give him a letter that says you'll be walking a plank.
You know, I don't understand a thing you say when you're a pirate.
If the first part of that scene was entirely true.
Yes.
And I think that's good enough for our return of the pirate, because I can feel my throat getting a little raspy. I feel almost like Teddy Pendergrass.
Oh, Teddy.
I could almost sing, but I sang Billy Paul, and I still haven't recovered from that.
No, that was a tough thing for you to do, but you did it really well.
Yeah. So let's just wrap this one up, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
Good conversation. I've only repeated myself 7 times.
No, you haven't. I mean, there's a lot that we can talk about how we've used our spaces. I think the point that we're trying to get across is that we've made really good use of our newfound space, and that we're doing a lot of really cool creative things with it. And if I think about what else can I do, what am I missing? I am still missing a little bit more flexible seating in my space. I am still missing working spaces where my students can go to actively work on something. So that's something that I'm continuing to work on. Like, we have ample wall space. I'd like to be able to put up some work on the walls that students, when they feel like going and adding to it, they can just continue to go and you know what, I need a little brain break. Let me go over to this wall and just continue to work on this poster that I've started. I'm still kind of in my head trying to work out how to do that and create a zone for students to go to take a mental break. So I feel like that is missing, this little mindfulness space in my classroom. I feel like that is missing where, the students will get up. I have a snack room. We call it the kitchen. So we have a little area where all of the snacks go. And if you need to take a break, my students know that they can eat whenever they want to because that's what we do. And when we need to go and grab a snack, just quietly go grab a snack from the snack space, have your snack wherever you want to have it. Make sure the trash goes where it needs to go, and then just come back and continue with the learning. So we've got a lot of zones figured out in our big space. We're still trying to work on that mindfulness. So when I'm thinking about where I want to go next, what I want to try and establish in our home, in school, that's where I'd like to go.
I like that mindfulness because it reminded me as I was thinking, what will we do before I get the swag bag? I'd like to, put on record what I want to try to do in this space to make it even more personalized, and rather than being this boring gray hallway that's already starting to come to life, already starting to become a natural extension of the class. I won't even say that. It is the class in the hallway. Is we have all these wonderful square cubed windows. And normally they'd be untouchable because you wouldn't have any ownership over them. But I did a little bit of counting, and the gym guy can count up to 13.
Oh.
And there's 13 of them. So my next extension is actually to do an art activity about with stained glass windows. And so we're going to measure it up and make stained glass with use. That's just a combination of tissue paper already into windows. Wish use. You see how I did that?
That's a new word.
But of course, we're going to make stained glass windows. And so I'm making this connection to mass shapes, stained glass windows. They're going to fit in each of those cubes. And so all of a sudden, and the sun comes through those windows beautifully in the morning. And so a space that would be untouched or unthought of, or no one thought was sort of theirs to use. That's so when you talked about wellness, said this is for me is a connection to art, math, stained glass windows, or wish use, and going from there. And that was that's my next plan, to use that space, to know that I'm going to do something with that space that hasn't been done in the 20 years I've been there.
I like that so much. That is so exciting, and it gives me ideas as well. So I love this conversation. We didn't really talk much about this with each other before.
Ready for a little swag bag?
Yes. Can I finish my sentence?
Yes. But of course.
So we didn't have this conversation before today. So it was really nice to be able to come up with these ideas and develop something that we want to try further. And it gives us so many different thoughts about what we'd like to try next.
It's a good change because last one we were really on point with everything we wanted to say and went over it. And this one was more of just a reflection on what's going on. We had our topic and we went with it. And I think our key swag bag is, one, the idea that we can take away the obstacles to our space, that when we not even want to say to think creatively, now that we have this opportunity for us to really expand our spaces, the one thing we've learned is that now I can use my room as like a timeline for the year. Nothing needs to come down. And I think that second swag bag is just being really comfortable sort of taking things, taking items, taking spaces that we now have the luxury of taking some ownership of, and really creating these wonderful, rich spaces that our students no longer have barriers. And this is a real blessing for us this year. One of those unseen blessings in September that have come through. I don't know, Pav, you want to throw something else in that swag bag?
No, you covered everything really well. And, it's a different time, different place. And we're doing the best that we can. And I think that there's some really rich learning that's coming out of it for the students and also for the teachers as well. We're really learning how to adapt to our spaces, adapt to our new learning environments, and make the most of it, and even make it, dare I say, better than it was before. And who would have thought that was something that could have happened this year?
No better way to end that episode than on that. Thank you so much for joining us in the Staffroom Podcast. If you really like the messages we're sharing and the anecdotes we're sharing, please share our podcast with a friend. We would love that.
And please also remember that we are Codebreaker ambassadors. Codebreaker is...
If you want to write a book and you got an idea, no better place to go than Codebreaker.
We are also part of the Teach Better Team podcast network, so please find us there, check us out, and check out some of the other amazing podcasts that are featured on that network.
Podcast is stacked with great podcasts on the Teach Better Team. We are also with School Rubric, where you can find us on our new live stream show, Office Hours, at the moment, bi-weekly on every Tuesday, but I think soon to be weekly.
Weekly, did you say?
On Tuesdays. And we cannot forget our bread and butter, because we are education's only teacher live drive radio music inspired DJs on The Drive.
Featured on Voice Ed Radio on Sunday evenings, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time to 10 p.m. Eastern Time, taking us out of the weekend and right back into the work week.
Everyone, thank you so much for joining us on the Staffroom Podcast, episode 64.
We will see you next week.